everybody doing today? I'll take it. Great. I'm Jemima. Lovely to be here. This is my first time speaking at a WordCamp, so thanks for having me. You guys are very nice, by the way. I'm just going to say that. I had like a bunch of people messaging me on LinkedIn, be like, oh, good luck with your talk. I'm really looking forward to your talk. I'm like, thank you. Even I'm not looking forward to my talk that much, so honestly, thank you for that. Let's get into it. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about, give me a sec, that one, PHP as a React developer. Found it. Now, a little bit about me. They already gave you the whole spiel, very impressive sounding. I was like, I didn't even know I was that cool sounding. Love that for me. But basically, what those accolades on the board, they mean two things. Number one, I love community events. I love coming out and talking to you guys about technologies, why I think they're cool and why I like them. And number two, I was a formerly gifted child, and now I just seek validation in many areas of my life. So here we are. Well, let's get into it. I want to talk to you about React, and specifically how you can approach React as a PHP developer. Now, when I started building websites, I started with WordPress, as I think most people did, actually. And I was using WordPress, and I started learning PHP, but then I decided, oh, I want to go to JavaScript, because I liked more front-end stuff. But now I'm here to talk to you about React from a PHP point of view, even though I don't write PHP. But you know what they say, those who can't do, teach. So here I am, get ready to be taught. Let's start from the beginning. Now, in the beginning, there was the internet. The internet was a simple place, or a not so simple place. We had our fever dream websites, and can I just say, I do miss these designs. Like, I miss when web dev was fun, you know? Let's bring back the marquees and the random space backgrounds, why not? But the point is, in the beginning, in the start of time, the internet was a simple place. We had static websites. What static means is that you were just displaying simple HTML pages. There was no interactivity going on the page. So this is an example of how an interaction would work in a website. If you wanted to submit a form, you have your HTML page, your PHP sends it to the server, and then an error response is returned from the server. So there wasn't any interaction going on the web. The issue with that was that, well, number one, it used to take a long time. If you're using dial-up internet, you have to wait like 30 seconds both ways, and who knows all the time we could be saving if we didn't have to wait 1 minute for a form to submit. But a company called Netscape Navigator, they didn't like that. So what Netscape Navigator wanted was, they wanted a way to handle all the validation stuff on the front end, on the client side, without needing that server back and forth. So Netscape Navigator contracted a developer called Brendan H., and Brendan built a little language called JavaScript. Now, there's a very fun fact about JavaScript, which is that it was built in 10 days. And when I hear this, I'm like, you know what, that makes sense. JavaScript of all languages would have been built in 10 days. But the point is, JavaScript was invented to be this language that supports HTML. But then it grew and it kept on growing until it got to a point where you cannot have the web without JavaScript anymore. 98.9% of the websites on the internet are built using JavaScript, especially when it comes to frameworks. There are a lot of JavaScript frameworks and libraries going around that are used to build the web. And today I'm going to be talking to you about one of those libraries, specifically React. Now let's take a look at a little timeline of React, how it started and how we got to where we are today. Fun fact, React was kind of inspired by PHP, which is not something I think a lot of people know, so let's go into it. In 2004, there was a little company you guys might have heard of called Facebook. Yeah. Now, when Facebook started, they built their website using PHP. So the entire website was built with PHP because that was what was like fastest at the time. But then Facebook started scaling, and then it got to like 5 years later, and then things were getting very convoluted. They had a lot of complex UI logic that they were shoving into PHP files. So what Facebook ended up doing is inventing something called XHP. Now, XHP was a PHP extension that was used to write HTML inside PHP functions. So you have your PHP functions, and they would be returning HTML elements. Now, this concept directly influenced another extension that was called JSX. JSX is a concept where you write your HTML in JavaScript. And this is very interesting because when React first came out, a lot of the pushback that it had was that, even from PHP developers, was that they didn't like that you were writing HTML in JavaScript. They felt like the two should be separated. But it's interesting that it started out in PHP in the first place, so it's kind of you guys' fault, so think about that. But the point is, JSX came out, and then this inspired the developer called Jordan Walk to start working on this, something he called Fax.js at the time, which eventually then became React. And that's how we ended up with an official framework called React that has all these super cool features and implementations, which I'll talk to you about in a sec. But also, I wanted to share this React documentary. If you're a bit of a history nerd like me, I think it's a super cool thing to check out. It's on YouTube. It's like a 1-hour interview with the developers at Facebook. It's if you need like something to do while you're doom scrolling, something can play in the background. So would recommend. Before we go into talking about React, let's talk about what's in it for you, because if there's one thing humans want to know, it's how things benefit them. So let me get into it. First of all, React is React is currently the most popular web framework that is used by professional developers. So that means in a professional capacity, if you're joining a new company or even just job hunting in general, it's likely you're going to run into React a lot. Also, 11 million plus websites in the world use React. I say plus because the numbers on this are very skewed. Like a source said 55 million, and that source said 11 million. There's a big gap between those two numbers. But I was like, let's be on the safe side and go with 11 million plus. So we're covering everything. So the fact is, React is a very popular framework. It's good to know. But also, let's talk about the actual technical advantages of using React. The first is React works in a declarative manner. What does that mean? Now, if I want to update a form in JavaScript, right? Something simple on the form, like I want to change the form button to say submitting while the form is submitting. In JavaScript, I have to do document.getElement by ID. I have to start updating the inner HTML. I have to do a lot of communication back and forth with the DOM. In React, all I need to do is declare a variable that says is loading or is submitting and tell my component if this form is submitting, render the text as submitting. If it's not submitting, render the text as submit. So it's declarative UI in that it's very straightforward to define your functions, how you want them to load on the page. Number two, React is performant, scalable, and reusable, as all the things that good code should be. The point is, when React was invented, it was invented specifically for the purpose of solving performance issues that Facebook was dealing with at that time. So performance was a very big thing that they focused on. Making sure the components loaded quickly, making sure things felt fast on the page was something that was very important to the people that built React. And you can still kind of see that in how you use it today. Writing components and loading them on the page, it feels very smooth and intuitive, so React is great for that. Number three, it's a familiar syntax. If you are already writing JavaScript or you're already writing HTML, React is very straightforward because you're still writing your basic JavaScript functions. So if I want to say, oh, if this, then that, I'm going to write it the exact same way I would write it in JavaScript, just inside React. So the learning curve isn't as high as you would think. And number four, it has a rich ecosystem and community. So much like the WordPress community, React is very popular in the tech space. But rich is also double-sided because it has Facebook backing it, and we all know they have the big bucks. So they basically get to go on world tours every year, praising React. And now you have me here doing the same thing. So haha, clearly it's working. Well, that's the point. So the point is there are a lot of reasons to learn React. Hopefully, I have been able to convince you with these 4 excellent bullet points. Well, let's get into it. So now we know how React started, and we know why you should be learning React. What actually is React? React is a JavaScript library for building component-based interactions. Component-based user interfaces. Sorry, misread my own notes. So when I say a library, I mean a library and not a framework. This distinction is very important because this is the entire basis of our talk today. React is intended to be a library and not a framework, and here's why. Number one, React only handles the view layer. Now, if you're building a usual framework or app, you have something called the MVC. So that's your model, your view, and your controller. Your model can be things like your database or pretty much like your database. Your view is what the user sees, so like all the interfaces that the user sees on the screen. And then the controller is handling the interaction, so things like form validation or routing. React doesn't do the first or the last thing. So they don't handle data and they don't handle interactivity. What they do is they just show you the view. It loads pages, it loads, what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean, yeah. And then we have a flexible setup. This ties into the first thing I said. So because React does not handle model and controlling on its own, it allows you pick whatever you want to do it. So you can install different libraries in React that allow you set up things how you want them to set up. So think of it like if a framework is an IKEA kit. Also, I've been really into IKEA lately. I don't know, you know what I like about IKEA? This is a random tangent. It has nothing to do with the talk. I like that they give you all the little kits and you get to feel like you're building something. Like I never feel more productive in my life than when I finish an IKEA thing. I'm like, I'm not even going to work today. I built a chair. I'm done. So yeah, IKEA is great. But the point is, a framework is like an IKEA kit. So it has everything that you need it to do in the box, right? You're not getting anything from anywhere. Unless, of course, one of those kits where like one screw is missing, then you have to call somebody and then they mail it to you and it's a whole thing. Most good frameworks are not like that. React, on the other hand, is like a fancy screwdriver. So it's not the kit, you still need to get all the tools, you need to get all the things that you'll be building yourself, but React helps you assemble them together. Hopefully this will be clearer when we go on, but let's talk about the third thing, and this is the most relevant point of React, which is that React can be inserted into parts of any existing app. Because of the way React was built as a library, it means that if you have your PHP project already set up, you can insert React into any point in that project, and I'm going to show you how in this next slide. Not this next slide, it'll be like 10 slides from now, but anticipate that. But now we're going to talk about how React works. So based on this understanding that React is a library and not a framework, let's look into the actual components that structure React into how it is. The first is component-based structure. A component is a reusable JavaScript function. So everything in React is built of components. This is what a component looks like. It's a simple JavaScript snippet that returns HTML. So you define your component, you can have all your logic inside. This could handle like your form validation, your submission, your authentication, whatever you want. But the point is every React component returns HTML because that's what, I mean, not everyone, but the point is, the idea of a React component is that it should return HTML because that's what is going to be displayed on the screen. So I have my component here and I'm rendering it and I'm calling the attribute world and it's returning hello world on the screen. So this is how React components work. Every single React application is just a bunch of components stacked on top of each other. You know, like those cartoons where it's like a raccoon wearing a trench coat and pretending to be a human being? That's what React application is. It's a bunch of components wearing a trench coat and pretending to be an application. So hopefully that was clear. The next concept that we have to discover in React is the concept of props. Now, props are properties, hence the name. Props are properties that are passed to React components, and these are what render different information in the component. So in our component here, we have the name field, and if I'm calling the name field with world, it's going to be rendering hello world. If I call it with WordCamp US, that's you guys, hey! It's going to be rendering hello WordCamp US. So that's the point of props. Props are used to update the data in a React component. Moving on from props, we have state. State is one of the more interesting features about React, and that's because, how do I explain state? The simplest way to put it is that state is the part of an app that can change. And when I say part of an app that can change, that will sound very strange to you, but believe me, when you get into React, you'll be like, no, that makes sense. So we have our React application. The first thing to understand about React is that React operates in the concept of unidirectional data flow. What does that mean? It means that we're only passing data from parent to child. So the data moves straight downwards. You cannot pass data from the child to the parent. So if I'm updating a prop in my parent component, that prop can be passed downwards, but I cannot update the same prop in a child component and expect it to move upwards. Another concept with React is that React operates with the principle of functional programming. So that means we want our functions to be pure. A pure function is the function that returns the same output when the same input is given. It's like a mathematical equation. If I have 2 plus 2, 2 plus 2 will always be 4. 2 plus 2 is 4 in Portland, 2 plus 2 is 4 in London, which is where I flew in from, and I'm 8 hours behind, and I had a lot of jet lag to deal with, but we're here anyway. So the point is, with functional programming, you're operating with pure functions, so you want to make sure your functions are behaving in a predictable way. This is the reason why you cannot mutate props in React. But because applications do require mutation, if you want anything to change, we need something that can handle that mutation, and that is where state comes in. State is state are values in React that are used to handle updates made to the app. So anything in my app that requires changing, whether it's changing the authentication feature of a user or changing, like if a button is clicked or not, toggling is clicked or not is clicked, that will be state. So state is any part of the app that can be updated. This is a React snippet that shows what state is. The first thing I want you to notice is in, oh, where's my mic? There you are. The first thing I want you to notice is in line 1, where I'm importing useState. This is an example of what we mean by React is a library that you can import, you can build however you want. You have the option to import whatever you want in React because it's not inbuilt into it. Even states, one of the very important features of React, is still something that you have to import yourself. So there are people that choose to not use states and use some other form of management. But the idea with React is it's like a DIY framework. Do it yourself, do whatever you want, have fun with it. So state works for anything that needs to be updated. So on this screen here, I'm just updating a button, but the fact that the button data is changing means I need to use a state property rather than a prop. Hopefully that's clear. Right, states can also be local or global. So now we've said that we have our props, right, and we have our components. So components are passing down data from parents to child. So a child component can have its own state. That means anything that I want to update in that child component has local states. But we can also have global states. Global states are variables that you need to share across an entire application. For example, checking if a user is authenticated to decide whether you want to load a login page or a home page. This is an example of global states because this is something that you might need to check at any point in the app. Now, the concept of global and local stage, it's honestly, it's like a whole other presentation on its own. But you guys are in luck because I do have another presentation on that, which is this one. So I go into more detail on how you can check like global and local states or like class and functional components in React, React hooks, blah, blah, blah. If you want to nerd out on React, that is a good talk for it. So that being said, we've covered the concept of props and state and how data is handled in React. Now let's cover what we call the single point of entry. Literally the single point of entry. The thing to note about a React application is that it can be inserted anywhere in an application. Now let's see what we mean by that. These two files here, you might be confused because you're like, there are 3 files on the screen. That's because I took the wrong screenshots. So these 2 files down there, the index.js and the index.html, are the 2 most important files in any React app. And let's see why. Index.html renders a root element. That root element is where our entire React application is going to live. Because when we go to our index.js, we see that what we're doing here is that we're doing react dom.createRoots in that root element, and we're rendering our app in that root element. So this is what the structure of a React application actually looks like. You can have your entire page, you can have like 50 different HTML pages that only use vanilla JavaScript or only use PHP or whatever you want, but you're just going to have one element, and in this case, it's my div with the ID of root, and that one element is where our entire React application lives. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics of React. Now, I feel like I've been talking about React a lot at a WordPress conference, so let's talk about PHP for a bit. Now, when I was preparing for this talk, I knew I had to include a slide where I'll talk about the differences between PHP and React, because if there's one thing developers love, it's comparing technologies. I can never go to any conference and say, like, which is better, this or that? I'm like, stop asking me these questions. Use whatever you want. But for you guys, I'll talk about it. Now, what are the differences between React and PHP? I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but there's no comparing React and PHP because there's literally no basis for comparing them. PHP is a server-side scripting language. React is a front-end JavaScript library. It would be like trying to compare a car and cardiovascular heart surgery. They just don't overlap that much. So the point is with React and PHP, it's not a matter of, oh, this is PHP and this is React and this is why one is better than the other. It's PHP is used for doing something and it does it well. React is also used for doing something and it does that well too. So let's see how we can use the 2 of them together to do both things well. But there is one thing that React and PHP have in common, and that is awesome communities. That's you guys, hey! Yeah, clearly I'm complimenting you guys so you like my talk more than anybody else, so keep that in mind. But like I said, it's not about PHP versus React, it's PHP and React. Our goal here is to see how we can use PHP and React to build better web applications. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want to do? Be good at our jobs and build good web applications? And I think WordPress is a good example of how PHP and React work well together. For example, WordPress is good for building headless solutions. So in a headless solution, you use React for your front end and you just get data from your WordPress. You use your WordPress as your CMS. You can fetch the data from it using like the WordPress API and display that in React. You can also embed React in your WordPress. So you can have blocks that use like a React plugin, or you can just embed vanilla JavaScript directly in your WordPress and you can have a React application working within WordPress. There's also the Gutenberg editor, which was built using React as well. So if you see that sidebar over there, should have zoomed in, but you live and you learn. You see that sidebar over there that says components. Now that is React DevTools. React DevTools are what you use to inspect React pages. And if you inspect it on Gutenberg, you'll see that all the blocks, all the drag and drop and everything, they are also built using React. So these are great examples of showing how React and PHP can work together to build fully functioning applications. Now let's look at some code. I feel like y'all are getting tired of me talking. So I'm gonna walk over to my laptop here. Just realized my laptop has been turned off while I've been talking. How's everybody doing? Y'all enjoying the talk? Yeah? Woo! Love that for me, thank you. See, that's that constant validation that I crave. Okay. I did not forget my own password. All right, let me know if you can see my screen. We can. Oh, I'll zoom in, yeah. Thank you. Is this better? Okay. So now what we have here is we have an index.php file, right? What you'll notice is down here, I am importing these packages. So this is my script packages, and these 3 packages that I'm importing. The first is the React library. This is the actual React, library, yeah. The second is the React DOM. Now, another interesting thing to note about React is that it's not just limited to web applications. You can import React wherever you want. So it can be like in the mobile file as well. But React DOM is what we use to allow us render React in the DOM. So this is an example of what we mean by React is a library that you can really use it to do anything. It's not just limited to one thing. And then the third application we're installing here is Babel. Babel is what we use to transpile JSX. So that's the HTML in JavaScript. We use it to transpile to vanilla JavaScript. So we're doing all of that, and the fourth thing we're installing is this app.jsx. Now this app.jsx is the actual React file. So this is where all that React data lives. This is a lot of text. You don't have to read all of this, but I did link the slides. I linked the GitHub demo in the slides, so you can check that out later. So the point is, what I'm doing here, let me just zoom out a bit. I am rendering a form on the page. This form is going to be handled with React. And in submitting this form, I'm going to be calling a PHP file, which is my submit.php here. So this is a straightforward example of how we can import React into an existing PHP application, even if it's just one component that we want to run. So let me run this real quick. You know what I love about live demos is that feeling of, is this thing going to work? Let's find out. Start.sh. Of course it is. To be fair, I was already running it because I plan ahead. So this is basically that React application I was talking about. This is the form that was built in React. If I inspect this, you'll see that this is the form that was built in React, and this is the root where it's being installed. One thing that React is great for is being reactive. So this is a really good example of why you would use React. When it comes to form validations, handling form validation in JavaScript, it requires a lot of event listeners and on-click handlers and all of that. And frankly, I hate it. But with React, because you can take advantage of so many different libraries, you can use like Formic or whatever other React tool there is, it means you don't have to write. I feel like this file is not a good example because I have like 140 lines of code. But usually, you don't have to write as many lines of code because a lot of this work has been done for you already. So all I'm doing with this React file here is handling input changes. So I want to handle validation for my forms, and I have all my form validation here. So I want to make sure the name field is always greater than 2 characters. I want to make sure the email is a valid email, and I want to make sure the message is at least 10 characters. So I'm handling all of that in React directly, and when I go on the page and I start typing, how do you spell WordCamp? There we go. It handles all my validation for me when I want them validated. It clears the validation away if they have met the tools, and it sends and it returns the response from my PHP server. So this is a straightforward example of how you can use React in your existing PHP code, like pretty straightforwardly. So it doesn't have to be something, you don't have to rewrite your entire, there we are. You do not have to rewrite your entire application because you want to use React. You can say, oh, you know what, I have this application, I've been running it in PHP, I feel like this one thing might benefit from using React over vanilla JavaScript. Let me import React and use it there. So that's really it. It's fairly straightforward. Let me go back to... I totally glitched. What was I going to say? Oh my God. Let me go back to the slides. Yeah, the slides. All right, let me go back to the slides. Yeah, the slides. So like I said, if you do want to check out the code, you can check out the demo here and then run it yourself. And it's a great way to practice getting used to writing React in PHP. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the demo. These are also some screenshots that I prepared in case the demo was not working, because Boy Scouts motto, always be prepared. Is that the Boy Scouts? I don't know, actually. I don't know why I said that. Index.php. So like I said, this is the file where our entry point for our React application lives in. Following that React single point of entry, in any file where you want to render React, you just need to pass in the elements that it's going to render in. these are the scripts that you install. Now, one thing to note is that these were only for demo purposes. If you were running this in production, you actually do need to get like a proper builder because you need to like compile stuff differently. But for running things locally on your local host, you can just import the scripts from React and get started with it. And then this is the main point of entry. So you're just passing your div with an ID of roots, and then you're calling your React app. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, that was that on how to install React in PHP. Now, this was just one implementation I showed you. But like I said earlier, there are many ways of implementing React in a PHP project or a WordPress project. I didn't really want to go too into multiple ways because honestly, there are lots. And I was like, I'm not going to write all of that code. So I was lazy, sorry. But the point is there are many ways to do that. So you could have it in like a Laravel code. You could have it with your WordPress blocks. You could have it however you want. So if you did want to get started writing React in your PHP, the best thing to say is, where do I actually need this code? Where can I make best use of the advantages that React offers? And then start implementing it there. Let's move on to the painful parts. Now, I have been talking about React for a while, and I know I'm making it sound all great and hunky-dory, and I'm like, this thing is the best thing ever, use it right now. But is it really that great? Yes, but also we have to talk about the bad parts too, or people will say I'm being biased, and I refuse to stand for that. Number one, now when I was starting out with React, like I said earlier, the concept of state is very interesting, right? It's not as straightforward as it sounds. I know I say, oh, it's just a part of the apps that can change, but when you get into it, you're kind of like, this is a weird thing I'm working with. So with states, for me, it was very easy to run into errors handling states because I wasn't used to working with states in that sense. In a JavaScript application, there is no concept of only one thing that needs to be updated or not. In the JavaScript application, in a vanilla JavaScript application, you could update whatever data you needed. In React, not so much. So states, one of the banes of my existence when it comes to React. Number two, because React lets you choose your own structure, there's a lot to choose, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on which is best for what. So if you are just starting out, it can be very easy to get bogged down in, oh, I need to use this one, or I need to use that one, or this is the best one to do that thing. Yeah, it's a library at the end of the day, do whatever you want. And the third thing is, the React community is great because it's so large, but because it's so large, people keep releasing new information every day. And I'm like, I can't keep up with all of this. So the fact is, when you're trying to learn things in React, it can be very, for me anyway, it can be very overwhelming because there's like 50 different courses on Coursera on just understanding states. And I'm like, surely we only need one, but no, we need all 50. So there we are. So I think for me, those were the things that I found most painful when working with React. For you, it might be something completely different, but I just wanted to share. And also, there was a significant lack of memes in my slides up to this point, so I kind of just got them all out at once. So let's move on to the practical tips. Now, these are my tips for actually learning React in a structured manner. The first thing I'll recommend is read the docs. React actually does have one of the best docs I've seen for any framework. I think they used to have like these legacy docs, and then they did this whole revamp in like 2023, and now their docs are super cool, super straightforward. It's like learning a course. React docs are great. And number two, take a course. Now, this is a course on Coursera that is done by Meta, so the people that invented React. So it's really good for actually breaking down a lot of the concepts that you would need to understand. So I would definitely recommend this one as well if you were looking to get into React. And then number three, just keep swimming. I just wanted to include this GIF. It's not actually relevant to the point. The point was, the best way to use React is to write it. So if you do want to get started with React, you need to start including it in your code. You need to start making the changes and implementing it however you would want. But yeah, I think that's all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much for listening. You've been an excellent audience, and I've been an excellent speaker. Woo! All right, Q&A time. Any questions? I actually can't see because these lights are in my eyes, so maybe if you yell if you have any questions. Oh, okay.
So with all the different versions, do you run into conflicts?
With which ones?
So with jQuery, you might have this jQuery and that jQuery and this jQuery, and then it says $sign is not an object. So do you run into that kind of conflicts between, like if you have this React component and this React component?
Yeah.
Do they clash?
Yeah, that's a great question. You gave me PTSD when you said jQuery. I was like, oh God, flashbacks, so many $ everywhere. But yeah, with React, I'm trying to think of what version they're on now. I think they just came out with 5 or 4. You'd think I would know this since I'm the one talking to you guys about it. But the point is with React, when they release a new version, it is still easy to use the previous version. You don't need to update the new version right away. So if you're still using the old version, so for example, I can't have a React component where one is in version 5 and one is in version 4. The entire code base has one React version. I was wondering if I could show you. Do I have any code on my laptop? Let me see. It's going to be too much work, actually. I don't even know why I tried. I'm going to have to remember which file it is and then open it. The point is React has versions. So if you go to your Node package manager, for example, it could be like React and it would be like 4.1. So as long as you're using 4.1 in your code, you can't have one component that's in another version. It's just that if you did want to update it, that's where you have problems. So that's something we are dealing with at my company right now because the entire code base was built in like React version 4. And it's like, oh, version 5 has come out and it's really cool. Should we update to it? And we're like, do you have the time to make changes to all those components? And we're like, no. So we're still living in version 4. But yeah, that's pretty much how React works. If there's a new version, your old code would still be in the version you wrote it in until you decide you want to make any updates. Thank you. Any other questions? So with the questions, people just use the mic. That's so cool. I love that. All right. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. This has been awesome. I've been working in React a little bit, and my team is talking about trying to incorporate more React into our projects, and I am curious. I know that React is a library, but it is hard because it's talked so much about as like being a framework. I'm curious what some of the common pitfalls you see with people using it, not understanding that it's a library. Like, what do you need to watch out for there?
That's a great question. Thank you. And thank you for thanking me for coming to talk. So with React as a framework, the way React works right now is people have actually we do tend to use it more as a framework these days because if you're working in an organization or anything, you kind of want to build like a rigid structure. So you don't want to be as flexible because you don't want people downloading 10 different files or 10 different libraries for handling form validation, you know? So I think when it does come to using React in an organization way, it is actually useful to have it as a framework because that way you're making sure everybody is working in the same way. So you can say, all right, guys, this is the library we're using for routing. This is the library we're using for form validation. Don't use anything else. Or it gets very messy because that's another thing we're dealing with at my current company where we have 3 different libraries for styling. So don't do that. But yeah. All right. Oh, I love it because you get to see people walk to the mic. It's fun. Okay. Hello.
Would you ever use, from the front end, would you ever use a React site and a WordPress rendered site? I mean, would you ever combine a page with the 2 of them?
Yeah.
If so, how and where?
So you can definitely use React within your WordPress site. That is something that is offered in blocks. I think there's a plugin called ReactPress, if I'm remembering that correctly, and that does allow you import React into your WordPress site. But the thing is, it's also a matter of asking yourself, do you really need it? So if you just need it for like a form validation or something, that's already handled in the WordPress plugin. You can import like a WordPress form that does all its own validation. So it's more of a matter of like, if the site you're building is super complicated that you feel it needs React, then sure, import it. But if not, just have fun with your pick and drop. You don't really need a whole thing. Hello.
First off, thank you for thanking us for being such a good audience.
You want me to thank you for thanking me? We'll go back and forth all day. All right.
So I'm new to understanding all of this. And so can you give me some examples of when I want to use React as opposed to just like plain vanilla JavaScript or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to using React, the main time to use React is when you want to take advantages of being super fast and reactive. So if it's going to be something simple like, yeah, I just blanked because I don't think anything in web dev is simple. I have a lot of PTSD from importing. You know when somebody gives you a feature and they're like, can you build this? And you're like, that'll take me 2 hours. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, why did I lie? So with React, I would say it's definitely a matter of if you feel like you can benefit from the declarative UI aspect. So if you feel like I'm building something and if I was using JavaScript, I'm going to be doing a lot of DOM manipulation. So a CRUD app. Like if you're doing like a create, a read, and an update thing, React is great for that because React is going to take a list of objects and render them with components, which means you get to take advantage of a lot of the reusability. That's one of the best things about React. I can render components in a for loop, so I can have like my entire notes returned to me in an array. I'm just going to say for notes in notes, render this thing. But in JavaScript, you have to do a lot, you do the same thing in JavaScript, but you have to do a lot of DOM manipulation where you're then saying, oh, document dot, like create element, document dot append this. So in that situation, I would say anything that requires a lot of manipulation of the DOM, React is a better tool for it. All right, thank you for thanking me for thanking you. Okay, I see no other questions, so I think we're good. 5, 4. All right, in case anybody wants to run last minute, we're good. All right, once again, thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thanks for your presentation. Since we do have a couple minutes, I actually have a question for you.
Love that.
So I remember a few years ago, it was a bit trendy to talk about building React Native websites with WordPress on the back end and doing headless implementations of WordPress. What's your opinion on that approach to building a website, and is there certain types of sites or projects that are a better fit for that than others?
Yeah, definitely. So I used to work at an e-commerce company before my current company, and one thing we used to offer was headless solutions. Headless is great for clients that require a lot of customization. So with the e-commerce we used to work with, it was Shopify. I don't know why I'm trying to hide the name. So we used to work with Shopify, and Shopify themes, they are fairly rigid in how they can be built. So if a client wanted like the Apple website for something, we'd have to be like, you cannot do that in Shopify. But if they had a lot of money, then we'll be like, but we can offer you React. So I think React is a great implementation if you are dealing with clients that have big bucks and want custom implementations. That's when I'd recommend using React as a headless solution. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Should we just keep this loop going?
Yeah, we'll just use the remaining, 5 minutes, keep thanking each other.
That's right.
Thank you guys so much as well. Really hope you enjoyed the talk.
Clear hands together for Jemima.